everything you need to know when it comes to how to rehabilitate AFL athletes, as well as those that want to prolong their career and play a long career, as many games as possible, and mitigate injury, also commonly used as prevent injuries. Now, we can't prevent all injuries with a chaotic game like Australian rules football. Obviously, there's contact involved. You get yourself into challenging positions on the field that are out of your control. However, where we do have some strong confidence in with the research, as well as how to apply effective methods, is things like your soft tissue injuries and overload injuries. And then by putting in these practices early on and getting into a good habit early on in your career, you're giving yourself your best chance to play as many games as possible and perform at a high level and enjoy your journey, which can be up and down, particularly the downs when you're injured. So we want to try and mitigate as many injuries as possible. Of course, if you're tuning in on TikTok, feel free to hit me up with a few questions and I'll make sure to answer all your questions, but we'll get straight into it. First one's really important for Australian rules football is efficient and quality movement patterns. As we know, you're going to cover anywhere between 10 to 14 Ks a game, and over a season where you're playing 20 to 24 games of Australian rules football, depending on what level you're playing, that's a lot of Ks in the legs, not of just straight line running, but a lot of change of direction, sprinting at high speeds, jumping, landing, getting hit, getting back up off the ground. So with all of that, we want to make sure that we've got quality sound movement mechanics. You're putting force into the ground in the right direction. Your body is got good connection from your ankle, knee, and hip. Everything's working, connected, and firing as one unit, rather than overloading certain areas by overusing. Perhaps maybe you're extending and flexing through your knee a lot more, and your hip isn't taking as much of the load. So we want to make sure that everything's working well in synergy, and efficient quality movement coordination is number one. So before you work on how heavy you can lift and how fast you can sprint, make sure you're putting lots of time and energy, especially at a younger age, in developing really sound movement mechanics. One of the best ways I've found that you can do that is by doing your off season with a track and field coach, or with a track and field environment where you're running with highly skilled movers from a running point of view, and that you'll absorb just by simply running with really efficient movers. You'll absorb how they move by seeing them both moving in a high speed fashion, acceleration fashion. And then for your agility point of view, playing some different sports in the off season can be helpful. Things like touch rugby, anything where you're using evasive work, and you can really work on your change of direction. So things like AFL 9s can be really good. Any different type of sports that you can do in the off season, even just some pickup soccer games or basketball games to work on that lateral movement. What you can do as well, if you're in season and you're listening to this, is just make sure that every time you're warming up, typically there's going to be some movement mechanics in there. So focus on quality, making sure that your foot is connected with the ground. You're either trying to work on changing laterally, or you're working and putting force into the ground that way, or putting the force straight underneath you for your sprinting mechanics. And of course, if you're working on your acceleration, you're putting the force straight down and behind, and pulling behind you. So make of those big three: acceleration, speed, and change of direction. Every warm up, you should be focusing on those three and making your movement mechanics more efficient. If you're working with a coach, they'll be giving you feedback, refining your quality of movement, like our AFL Strength Conditioning coaches. So that can be a great place to start if you haven't got a coach in your corner. And we use a lot of video feedback in that, so you can see exactly what we're seeing, and we can talk you through some areas that you can improve to help your coordination, help your timing, and like I said, have the whole body working as one. So efficient quality movement is number one if you want to mitigate injuries, and if you're in rehab, we put a premium focus on that. And then the next part, and this is a recent catch up with the legend Dean Benton, who's an expert when it comes to high performance training in the track and field and rugby circles, but he also has a great understanding in Australian rules football. So it was great to be able to speak about the sport and where he sees it going, and how important it is to maintain elastic qualities, particularly. And I loved how he put it, you don't want your older athletes dying a slow death. So if you're above the age of 30 and you're listening to this and you want to prolong your career, and every year, especially for professional, you're maximizing how much money you can make on the sport, but also how much you can enjoy the sport. Typically, your strength and your aerobic capacity is going to be easier to maintain because you've got a lot of pre-seasons and a lot of chronic load. Basically, you've been working in the system for a long time, well over 10 years, so you're well conditioned in strength and from a conditioning point of view. But therefore, we can reduce your volume to look after your joints, but we don't want to reduce the amount of elastic work you're doing, i.e. plyometrics. And that was something that, catching up with Dean, he spoke about really highly how important that is. And those that move really soundly from an elastic point of view, things like forward bound hops, for example, and they've got really good mechanics, really good timing, really good coordination, and good power, typically don't get injured and maximize how long they can play. And that's something he's seen anecdotally, as well as the research shows that you can maintain your strength well as you get older. However, if you don't get regular exposure to high intensity plyometric training, you really lose that speed and that elastic quality. So put a premium on, if you're young, developing really good quality plyometric jumping technique and timing. And if you're older, make sure you don't let go of those qualities by getting continual exposure to that, both in season, off season, and pre-season, so you can maximize your performance, which will also reduce your likelihood of injury by being quality in that area. So reactive strength, elasticity, really, really important. Make sure you're getting well exposed to that. In fact, our strength and power program, our online program, which we have a 14-day trial, you can click that link in our Instagram bio. We give you access to our plyometrics series. And for those academy members that are with us, you can head over. I've just uploaded a whole series of plyometric training in our academy membership. So if you're on our online program or you're a member, make sure to check that out. I just uploaded that 2 weeks ago. So you can watch the videos in there. And then number 3, this is more from a psychology mindset point of view. We want to make sure that you're having fun and you're enjoying the game. So staying curious and having a growth mindset, I believe, is really important in whether you're in rehab or just your body's healthy and you're just wanting to maximize how long you can play for. Making sure you connect to why you started the game. Typically, that's because you enjoy it and playing with your mates. So stay connected to that and tap into that energy, that play aspect of having fun and enjoying the process, but also that willingness to learn, an open mindset and growth mindset on learning new things and refining your craft is really, really important. If you get stale and you feel like you're not growing as an athlete, typically that's when people either stop playing or they start to really burn out. So growth mindset's really, really important, staying curious and hungry and constantly asking questions on how you can improve and have a real laser focus on areas that you're trying to get better at. And from a rehab point of view, I guess I should touch on that too. It's easy to get something to feeling like there's a lot that you can't do. And typically that will, if you're early stage rehab, that will be football. So you won't be thinking so much spending your energy on connecting to why you play. We want to focus on things that you can do in that phase and how that's going to help you long-term, big picture, in when you do return to playing football of what you love. You're now a better athlete. You're better prepared to perform at a higher level. So focusing on the things that you can do and doubling down on those and maximizing your program that way. And that way that builds momentum, builds confidence, and you're much more likely to enjoy that process because you're actually getting better at something than focusing on things that you can't. Easier said than done. Tip number 4, routine. So making sure, I've talked about this a lot, but you're always going to get much better results when you're consistent at something. So there's no point trying new things all the time and then not doing it consistently enough to actually reap the benefits of it. You're going to get much better results when you do something for over a long period of time. Of course, you need to make sure that one thing is effective and that it is worth the time and energy, of course, which only you can evaluate that, and coaches can help you. But if you know that it's value for you, don't just drop it and then focus on the next fancy thing that you've heard of. You're much better on keeping those basics in and then just adding layers to it on how you can polish it up. Okay, so an example of that, let's just say you want to improve your recovery from game to game. you want to start with a post-game routine of some form of cooling down and relaxation. So that might look like static stretching. And then over time, that may evolve into getting a massage while you're still doing your stretching routine. Then you might add in a layer of mindfulness breathing to help you sleep at night and relax and switch off from the game, because we know that mind can stay busy reviewing the game when it's just happened. So those are some things that you start with a routine. So I'm going to commit to something that I can stick to for a long period of time, which is the static stretching, which is really easy. There's no friction with that. You can do that anywhere in the club rooms, minimal equipment. And then from there, you start to layer on things, but you don't stop the actual fact that you're doing a post-game routine. Hopefully that makes sense. So you can apply that to anything. Start with just a clear focus, something that has low barrier to start, and then from there, over time, you start to evolve it, rather than just starting with um, the absolute premium best thing that you can do that's out there. And then if you don't see the benefits of it, or it's really challenging to be able to stick to that on a consistent basis. Let's just say, like, oh, I'm going to go do cryotherapy after every game. Actually getting access to that facility is going to be a constraint, particularly if you're playing on weekends. So stick with something that's more basic, something you can do consistently over a period of time, and then add layers and build it over time. So routine's key. The other aspect with your routine, for some can be a real stickler with routine, and they do it no matter what. We want to make sure that you are fluid. So listen to your body, listen to where the demands of the game is, where you are in your in-season, pre-season, off-season, what are your focus areas. And there's times where that routine, you might need to tweak it. For example, if you've just done a real wet weather, heavy contested game, and your current routine to recover is static stretching, that might be useful when you've run a lot and it was hot and your muscles feel super tight and you want to lengthen your muscles and relax your muscles. However, it's a contest game and your body is highly inflamed from all the collision based. You might find ice bath is more effective to be able to reduce that swelling and that inflammation in the body and the bruising. So, have a set focus on, I'm going to commit to 20, 30 minutes of recovery after game, no matter what. And then you have your methods where you slightly tweak that routine so it's specific to you. So you've got your routine, but it's fluid to what's most important on the day. And that way, if you do have a scenario where you don't have access to a certain equipment, you've got other options that you can do, and you can still stick to the routine of doing some form of recovery after a game. Rehab, making sure you've got a support team. This is really, really important. It's a roller coaster rehab. So whether you're coming back from a short-term injury, let's say 3 weeks, or a longer-term injury, let's say an ACL, 10 months to a year, you want to make sure you've got a support team. Typically in the AFL, that's going to be a physio, it's going to be a strength and conditioning coach. At times, it's going to be a sports doc, sports psychologist, sports dietitian, your coaches, your peers, your teammates. So you want to have the medical and physical performance support, professional support, but also support outside of that as well with your friends and your family. But leaning on those people will be really important, that circle, making sure you're really clear on who's helping you towards your goal and who's distracting you. We want to limit your time with those distraction people that are pulling you away, and obviously spend more time with those that are pushing you forward and supporting you and stretching you along the way to get back to your best. Hopefully there was some golden tips in there, some gems along the way. Feel free to send me some questions on that topic on our Instagram. You can direct message us by following us on Prepare Like a Pro. I'm more than happy to go into more detail, but we're going to go straight into this week's podcast. As I mentioned, for Academy members, check out the new exercise library. I've got plyometrics, drilling, strength and powered exercises, as well as warm-up protocols that I like to do for AFL athletes. So you can check that out in the exercise library on the dashboard when you sign into the membership. Everyone on our online program, including if you're doing a 14-day trial, get access to our academy. And if you just want the education piece, you don't want to follow a program, it's only $20 a month. We've got one for footballers and one for strength and conditioning coaches and business owners that have run a personal training business. So you can check that out. They've obviously got 2 different streams for the different audience type: football base is all for athletes wanting to get fitter, faster, stronger, where for the coaches it's more how we do our programming, how we manage prepare like a pro from a business point of view. So check that out. I've also got a 30-day trial for our academy as well, so direct message me if you're interested on that trial. This week on the podcast, we've got Dan Zachnich. He's the senior physical performance coach at GWS Giants. He spent majority of his time at Fremantle before the GWS Giants, so he's been in the industry for 10 years, and we focused on athletic development for Australian rules football. So that was a great episode. I hosted a live interview 2 weeks ago. We're releasing that on our podcast, Spotify, iTunes, this Wednesday. So make sure to check that out. And if you love the show, give it a rating, and please also share it with a mate that you think will enjoy that episode. It allows us to grow our community and reach more listeners. The live episodes for this week, I have two, both on Wednesday, one at 2:30 p.m, the other one at 4 p.m. So we've got John Mitchell, who will be focusing on strength and conditioning development. He's a senior coach. He also works at Australian Strength and Conditioning Association and has for some time now. He was on the panel for my ASCA Level 3. Wealth of knowledge. Really looking forward to catching up with him and discussing an important topic in terms of strength and conditioning development for the future coaches. So check that out on our YouTube channel. Make sure to subscribe for all our live chat shows. That's 2:30 p.m. this Wednesday. Ender King, groin and ACL expert. So we're going to be talking about those two topics. That's 4 o'clock this Wednesday. So make sure to check that out. He's a real expert when it comes to injury mitigation and also rehabilitation in groins, as well as ACL return to play. So join us and send through your questions for both those guests via any of our socials. And then a bite-sized episode is with Steve Allen, a physiotherapist of the West Coast Eagles. So I hosted that podcast a year and a half ago, releasing 10 minutes of the highlights snippet from that episode. If you enjoy it, make sure to listen to the whole episode. Interesting poll I recently did. What do you think is the most dangerous training method for strengthening for AFL team-based, or not necessarily AFL, but field-based team sports? Olympic lifting as a method came voted at 22%. Powerlifting, 16%. So the difference between those, Olympic lifting is your cleans, your jerks, and snatches, where powerlifting is typically doing heavy deadlifts, heavy bench press, heavy squats. CrossFit, which is a modality of training, it's also a sport. So doing CrossFit modality workouts, you could use that as a form of cross training, but also as a form of strength training. That came out as 58%. So that came out leading as the most dangerous, risky exercise modality. And then plyometrics, only 4%, which is really interesting because I feel like working in the industry, Olympic lifting and powerlifting, well, typically powerlifting, you're going to see some form of that in every program. And that ranked at 16%. But plyometrics, I feel like, is not utilized as much. My assumption would be either because of the risk or maybe the misunderstanding. So perhaps it's more the misunderstanding, the fact that it's such a strong voted, the least riskiest modality out of those four. This week's poll on my LinkedIn and Twitter, so feel free to follow me on either one to contribute to these findings. I post one poll each week for high-performance strength and conditioning coaches. This week is going to be, how often do you typically conduct a performance assessment with your training squad? So is it monthly, quarterly, biannually, or other? Where I'd love for you to comment below. Perhaps you never test your athletes and training is testing because you use GymAware and other technology to be able to monitor your athletes. But I'd love to hear in the comments. Always gets you thinking, these polls, and I think it's really valuable information. So the more people that can contribute, the better. Workout to wrap up this week's show. I always provide a free workout. This one's just a good old-fashioned, hard, solid workout that I love to give the athletes I work with. More that are in rehab, perhaps we're managing their running loads. I think all athletes deep down like to be challenged, and if you're not playing the game because you're in rehab, sometimes rehab can be quite slow. So to be able to get some exertion and really push yourself and challenge yourself more from a mental point of view, I think the specificity of cross training for running field-based sports is very low. So by having some competition with yourself, I find these can be quite engaging, these type of workouts, which it sort of is leaning on the CrossFit modality in that you're competing for your fastest time and you're just doing some slightly different workouts compared to like interval-based cross-training, which I would say 90 to 95% of the prescribed workouts I give for off-legs conditioning is more interval-based conditioning, where you're doing, 40 seconds on, 20 seconds off, for example, on a watt bike at certain watts, percentage of their watts. However, I throw these in every now and then just for a challenge and to, like I said, engage the athlete a bit more. And some absolutely love it, and I'll do a little bit more of these type of workouts, maybe one a week, and others it's just not for them, and I typically won't program as part of their cross training. So it's all off depending on who's in front of you. But this one's a tough one, so give it a go. Really important, for also effective for those trying to just typically drop a bit of body fat and increase their metabolic expenditure. These type of sessions can be really good if the athletes engage and they're all in, because you get typically a high average heart rate with these. And then I might start with this type of workout and then do some like a standard bike or swim cross training session after it, where it's interval based. But this one, you're doing 100 calories on the air dyne for time, but a little bit different of a setup. So you've got 2 minutes of work. You start on the rower as a 25 cal buy-in. So typically male AFL athletes will get that done in 50 to 55 seconds. Of the 2 minutes work, they've now got 1:05 on the assault bike to get as many calories as they can. And then you have 3 minutes rest. So the way that would work, when you're fresh, you get that 25 cal row done in, let's say, 50 seconds. You now quickly jump on the bike. That takes 5 seconds transition. You got 1:05 left. And let's say they smack out 40 calories. They're nearly halfway done with the workout. Now they rest for 3 minutes. Back onto the calorie rower. They do 25 cal row. They're a little bit more fatigued. This takes 55 seconds. Takes 5 seconds to get on the assault bike. Now they've got a minute and they get 30 calories. So now we're 70 calories in. Then you going back you have your 3 minutes rest, back on the rower. This time it takes them a minute. Jump on the assault bike. They're really fatigued. They've cooked. It took 10 seconds to get their feet, get the machine going. So they've lost 10 seconds in transition. They got 50 seconds and then they get 20. So around 90 calories, and then bang, you get an extra round. Okay, so it's a bit of an incentive to constantly push yourself to maximize, go hard on the rower, so you got the most amount of time as you can with the assault bike to do least amount of rounds as possible. I find AFL athletes typically do this depending on the assault bike they use. If you use a road bike, aim for under 5 rounds. If you're using the old-fashioned assault bikes, I think you can get this done under 3 rounds. But give it a go. I'd love to hear how many rounds you got it done in. And let me know what you think. I always provide a workout at the end, either a strength, a power, a classic conditioning running workout, and I thought I'd throw in a CrossFit style off-feet conditioning session. So let me know what you think. And I'll see you guys next week on our live interviews with Andy King and John Mitchell.